Feel the quiet pressure living just beneath your ribs, the hum that shows up when you open your banking app, when someone mentions retirement, when the month lasts longer than the money. It isn't only about numbers, it is about breath, about safety, about the ache of wanting a life that does not wobble. You are not weak for feeling this. You are human. Your body keeps the score of every surprise bill, every rushed choice, every promise you made to yourself and could not keep because life was shouting, "I see you." I understand the shame that sometimes floats behind your eyes, the tiredness of carrying the same worries from year to year, the quiet prayer you whisper, "Let this be the season I change," without breaking myself to do it. When money feels dangerous, your nervous system does what it was designed to do. It looks for speed, for certainty, for the nearest exit. The amygdala lights up, cortisol rises, the mind narrows to the path that seems quickest, not always the one that is wise. Haste feels like relief because it ends the discomfort, yet the relief is brief and the cost is real. The brain confuses urgency with importance, noise with guidance, motion with progress. This is not a moral failure, it is a biological reflex, and that is why you don't need more panic, more blame, or more noise. You need a calmer signal, a steadier rhythm, a way to let wisdom speak to a body that is braced for impact. Solomon's Proverbs offer that rhythm. They were not written for perfect people in perfect seasons. They were written for ordinary people who wanted their steps to matter. They read like gentle guardrails for a mind that runs hot and a heart that is tired of carrying the same load. They speak to patterns, to small turns of the wheel that keep a life on the road, to choices that quiet fear because they add up. Practical spirituality meets emotional neuroscience here. Wisdom slows the spin, breath returns to the chest, and the prefrontal cortex, the part of you that plans, restrains, and chooses, comes back online. You do not need a louder plan but a truer one, not a hurried fix but a guided one, not a performance but a practice that holds. Prosperity, in this ancient lens, is not merely more, it is stronger container before it is fuller content. Without capacity, abundance slips through as if through cracked clay. You have felt that. Income rises, peace does not. The leak is not always out there in the market. Often it is in here, in habits that feel harmless, in reflexes that steal tomorrow. The Proverbs point to images your body understands. A meal burned because the flame was turned up too high. A leash that shines but still tightens. A jar that cannot hold new oil. The quiet steps of an ant that outwork the noise of a crowd. A ship that drifts because it sails by one lonely star. Your heart knows these pictures and your hands can learn their lessons. There are patterns that block the flow of honest wealth. The pull towards speed that burns what patience could have ripened. The convenience that becomes quiet captivity, the lifestyle that grows while the margin shrinks, the work that sprints and collapses instead of moving with steady feet, the decisions made in isolation that cost more than they save. You have met these patterns in different seasons and different clothes, yet the feeling is familiar, a heavy chest, a tight jaw, a mind that loops. Today is not about shame for what you did under pressure. It is about the relief that comes when pressure meets principle and calms. It is about trading the quick comfort that fades for the quiet freedom that stays. Breathe slowly and notice your shoulders soften. Imagine a table set with simple tools, a clear plan that respects the pace of wisdom, a path out of debt that returns your breath to you, a margin that protects rather than punishes, a practice of steady effort that composes your days, and a circle of counsel that widens your vision when your view narrows. None of this asks you to become a different person overnight. It asks for something humbler and stronger, a heart willing to be taught, a body willing to slow, a mind willing to repeat small, wise steps until they become a path. This is how peace begins. Not with spectacle, but with alignment. Not with a surge of willpower, but with a dependable cadence that even a tired soul can keep. You are not behind, you are arriving. The fear that kept you moving too fast can learn to rest. The habits that kept you stuck can learn to yield. The story you tell yourself about money can learn a gentler ending. Let the words of wisdom meet the science of your body, and make a home there. Let discernment become muscle memory. Let your choices grow quiet and strong. As you listen, expect the ground under your feet to feel steadier, the breath in your chest to deepen, and the future to sound less like a threat and more like a promise you can keep. There is a particular tension that visits the body when a decision is rushed. The jaw tightens, the breath moves to the top of the chest, the eyes scan for an exit that will make the discomfort stop. A sale clock blinks, a message promises a limited window, a friend swears this is the moment or never. Your heart begins to run ahead of your feet. You click, you sign, you say yes because saying yes feels like relief. The relief is real, the cost is real as well. Later, when the room is quiet, the numbers on the page do not care that you were scared. They only tell the truth of what happened when pressure dressed up as wisdom. Under that pressure lives a belief that sounds reasonable. If I do not move now, I will miss everything. It whispers that patience is the same as passivity, that reflection is just hesitation wearing a nice suit, that slowing down means losing your place in line. The nervous system loves this belief because it offers a quick end to a painful feeling. The mind tightens its focus, the world shrinks to a single path, and anything that interrupts the sprint feels like a threat. This is not a character flaw. This is a survival pattern. It kept you safe when danger was teeth and shadow. But money is not a predator to escape. Money is a field to be cultivated. Fields ask for season and sequence and care. Wisdom answers the rush with a quieter strength. Plans that are steady outperform gains that are hurried. Haste multiplies mistakes because it narrows vision and turns off the parts of the brain designed for foresight and restraint. When the body slows, the wiser regions come back online. Options widen, trade-offs grow clear. You begin to see that what looked like an emergency was often a sales tactic, that what looked like a perfect entry was a coin flipped in a storm, that what felt like destiny was only noise turned up too loud. This is not about becoming slow for the sake of slowness. It is about matching pace to purpose, heat to ingredient, timing to outcome. Imagine a kitchen on a quiet evening. A cook is hungry and impatient. The flame turns high because high looks like progress. The pan sears, the edges blacken, and the meal that might have nourished becomes something to throw away. More heat did not mean more flavor, it meant more damage. Money decisions carry the same physics. The right heat at the right time releases goodness. Too much heat ruins what could have fed you for a long while. You already know this in your bones. You have tasted the difference between food that was rushed and food that was tended. Your choices deserve the gentleness of that tending. Some people discover that a simple gate can protect them from the burn. One day, between desire and decision, gives breath a chance to return and numbers a chance to speak. Rules chosen in a calm moment become a small compass when the crowd gets loud. A personal rule for investing decided in quiet can stand steady when a glowing promise crowds the screen. A single rushed decision, named and learned from, becomes a teacher instead of a wound. None of this requires a lecture. It asks for rhythm. It asks for the dignity of time. It asks for the humility to let wisdom set the temperature before appetite sets the pace. The world will continue to sell urgency because urgency sells. Timelines will keep shrinking. Counters will keep counting down. Stories of overnight fortune will keep arriving impatient and loud. You do not need to fight those waves with equal noise. You can let them pass while you hold to a pace that belongs to you. Opportunities that cannot survive one day of reflection are not the kind that build a life. Gains that require you to silence your body's alarm bells are not gains that sleep beside you in peace. The future you want will not be lost because you chose to be clear. It will be found because you chose to be true. There is a softness that comes when you practice this kind of patience. The jaw loosens, the breath lowers, the shoulders find their place again. What once felt like punishment begins to feel like protection. You notice that slowing down did not make you late, it made you accurate. You notice that waiting did not drain momentum, it preserved direction. You notice that the anxiety you used to carry into every purchase and trade and signature has less room to live when wisdom stands at the door and asks the simplest question: is this aligned with the life you are actually building? In this light, the rush stops looking like ambition and starts looking like a leak. Wisdom does not shame you for the meals you burned in the past. It turns down the flame now. It lets flavor return. It lets the right heat do what only the right heat can do. And in that quieter kitchen, where patience and clarity work side by side, wealth becomes something else entirely. Not the thrill of a moment, but the nourishment of a table that keeps feeding you and the people you love. There is a hum that follows borrowed money, a low sound under the day that never quite turns off. It is there when the card slides and when the bill arrives. When you promise yourself, this is the last month you will carry a balance, and when the next small emergency introduces itself with a polite knock that becomes a demand. The body knows this sound. The shoulders tuck forward, the breath lives shallow, and sleep comes later than it should. You are not careless. You are carrying more weight than a single heart should have to carry for this long. Convenience makes a gentle offer. Tap and go, pay later. Spread it out. The brain loves this promise because it turns down immediate discomfort and turns up a feeling that looks like safety. Dopamine rewards the quick relief. Cortisol quiets for a moment. The story ends here for the body, but not for the balance. A new payment appears on the horizon, and the horizon moves farther away. This is how relief becomes a circle. What felt like control at the register becomes a quiet pressure in the night, and you begin to wonder why a life that looks normal on the outside feels so narrow on the inside. Wisdom names what is happening without shaming the one it loves. Borrowing trades freedom for obligation. It does not accuse. It does not sneer. It simply tells the truth, the way light tells the truth about a room. Obligation narrows choice. It speaks into your plans before you can, deciding the order of your day and the order of your future. Prosperity needs air and space to grow. Obligation takes air from the room and space from the calendar. The destination you want is not only a larger number, it is a life with more room to choose the good thing when it appears. Emotional neuroscience adds its own quiet clarity. An unpaid balance behaves like an open tab in working memory. The mind keeps checking it, even when you're not thinking about it, even when you're trying to be present with the people you love. This is why the fatigue feels heavier than the math. The brain prefers closure. It prefers a clean line. When the line stays open, attention fragments and impatience grows. You begin to reach for more convenience to soothe the impatience created by the last convenience. It is not a moral failure. It is a loop. There is another rhythm that feels different in the body. Instead of trying to end the whole story in a single dramatic gesture, some people begin where momentum is most likely to appear. The smallest balance becomes the first quiet victory. The nervous system learns that change is possible because it can feel it and see it. Confidence is not a speech. It is a sensation that returns when you can point to a finished line and say that one is done. The loop begins to open. The hum loses volume. The mind stops checking that tab quite so often, and the day grows a little wider. Many are surprised to learn that conversations about terms can be human and hopeful. The voice on the other end is often measured and practical. A kind request sometimes lowers the pressure valve, a better rate appears, a fee disappears, a schedule shifts in your favor. None of this feels like conquest. It feels like respect returning, like being treated as a person again. When respect comes back into the room, shame often leaves, and with it the frantic need to hide. There are seasons when consumption pauses, so healing can begin. Not an oath shouted into the mirror, but a stretch of days where new debts do not enter the story, and the nervous system learns a different kind of comfort. It learns the comfort of a calendar that is not already spent. It learns the comfort of a purchase that did not need to be paid for twice. It learns the comfort of evenings that do not end with the same quiet dread. This kind of rest is not laziness. It is restoration. The image that lingers is simple and sharp. A golden leash is still a leash. It shines in the light, gathers compliments, looks like a gift, and yet it tightens just the same. It tells you how far you may go. It tells you how quickly you must return. Freedom does not argue with the shine. It reaches for the clasp. It listens for the faint click that means the neck is its own again. That sound is small, but the silence that follows is large. There is a spiritual dignity in reclaiming that silence. Stewardship is not a cold word. It is a warm one. It means receiving your life as something worth tending, your future as something worth protecting, your voice as something worth hearing over the noise of clever offers. When this dignity returns, decisions begin to align with truth. The heart remembers that it was made for more than survival. The mind remembers that it can plan without panic. The body remembers what it feels like to walk unhurried and unhooked. You may notice the first sign of change in your breathing. It comes back to the belly. It moves freely again. Even before the balances fall, the inner temperature lowers. You look at the same world with a different nervous system, and the same choices begin to yield different fruit. The golden leash glitters less. The wide path glows more. Convenience stops feeling like a rescue and starts looking like a cost you no longer wish to pay. What remains is a quieter strength, the kind that does not need to announce itself. The kind that builds a life that can hold joy without fear that the bill for joy will arrive tomorrow. There is a strange ache that visits when income rises and peace does not. More came, and the room still feels tight. More came, and the breath still lives shallow. Emergencies clear the doorway, then circle back like weather that never quite leaves. You begin to suspect that the problem is not only the size of the harvest, but the shape of the container that tries to hold it. The bank reflects growth and the body does not. That mismatch is exhausting. Lifestyle creep rarely announces itself. It moves like a quiet tide, lifting little comforts by a finger's width here and there until the shoreline has shifted and you no longer remember where it used to be. The mind adjusts faster than the budget. The nervous system grows used to a slightly softer seat, a slightly brighter screen, a slightly quicker delivery, and calls it normal. Hedonic adaptation is the clinical name. Your heart knows it as the feeling of being grateful for a moment and then strangely empty again. Consumption promised to fill the room, yet the room feels thinner. The ancient voice speaks with a kind firmness. The wise store treasure and oil. The foolish consume it all. It is not a scolding, it is a map. Storing is not hoarding. It is honoring the future you with space to breathe when the wind turns. Consuming it all is not celebration. It is surrendering tomorrow so that today can glow for a few minutes longer. Margin is not punishment. Margin is protection. It is the fence that keeps the garden from being eaten by the very appetite it was meant to nourish. Emotional neuroscience adds a tender explanation. When everything that comes in must go out to sustain the new normal, the brain never gets to relax. There is no buffer to absorb the unexpected. The amygdala stays alert, scanning for threat, and the body learns to live braced. That brace costs clarity. It narrows vision. It makes even small surprises feel like verdicts. Margin calms that circuitry. It tells the body that surprise does not equal danger because there is room. Room turns off alarms that never should have been on for so long. Imagine a clay jar on a wooden table. It looks strong from a distance, but there are tiny lines along the side that only appear when the light hits just so. New oil is poured, and the scent rises, and for a moment everything is wonderful. Then the table grows slick. The level falls. The jar did not fail to receive, it failed to retain. A cracked vessel will make even abundance look like scarcity. The answer is not to shame the oil. The answer is to tend the vessel, to strengthen the walls, to honor the slow, steady work of sealing what has been leaking. Wise margin begins with a decision about identity rather than arithmetic. Who are you when more arrives? What story do your choices tell about safety, gratitude, and trust? When identity is settled, the numbers follow with less drama. A cap on lifestyle becomes an act of self-respect rather than deprivation. A buffer for trouble becomes an act of peacemaking rather than fear. Giving and saving that move first become a quiet liturgy that reminds the heart what it loves most. Repetition becomes devotion. Devotion becomes design. You may notice that this kind of order changes how joy feels. Pleasure that used to arrive sharp and vanish quickly begins to arrive deep and linger. A simple evening becomes rich because you are not spending energy to keep the whole story from tipping over. You can taste your food. You can hear your own laughter. Nothing spectacular has happened on the outside. Yet something weighty and kind has settled on the inside. The soul recognizes the feel of a life that can hold blessing without spilling it. There will always be voices that treat margin like cowardice and consumption like courage. There will always be images that sparkle and say that fullness means fullness now. But the older wisdom smiles. It knows that preservation is not fear. It is faith with sleeves rolled up. It knows that restraint is not scarcity. It is the art of making room for the good to remain. In that art, the jar changes, the cracks are mended, the oil stays, and what once felt like a chase becomes a table that stays set, a light that stays warm, a future that waits for you without the old tremor in its hands. There is a certain kind of tired that does not come from work. It comes from starting and stopping, from sprinting and stalling, from living in the peaks and the crashes. The heart wants progress and receives adrenaline. The day fills with small fires, the night fills with small regrets. And a quiet whisper follows like a shadow. If only I could be steady. The body knows the cost of inconsistency. Shoulders climb toward the ears. Breath grows thin. Sleep feels crowded. This is not laziness. This is a nervous system trained to chase sparks instead of tending embers. Drama seduces because it feels like movement. The brain loves novelty. Loves the bright ping of a new message, loves the rush that says this moment matters more than the last 10 hours. Variable rewards light up the same circuitry that casinos study. Dopamine arrives in quick flashes, not in deep wells. Yet wealth rarely grows in flashes. It grows in furrows, in lines drawn straight across the field, in steps that look small today and decisive tomorrow. The wisdom literature points to a tiny teacher that does not give speeches. It simply carries, organizes, returns, and carries again. The lesson is not noise. The lesson is rhythm. When a person finds a simple rhythm that can be trusted, something softens in the chest. The amygdala no longer needs to scan as if everything depends on this moment. The prefrontal cortex arrives with its gifts of planning and restraint, not as a taskmaster but as a friend. Work stops being a stage and becomes a path. A block of focused attention becomes a shelter where scattered energy gathers itself and becomes useful. The world outside can swirl and argue and tempt, but inside the boundary of that attention, a different weather holds. Calm, warm, capable. Many discover that giving their best attention early changes the taste of the entire day. Before the flood of other people's urgency, there is a small window when mind and body are still aligned. In that window, one task that actually moves revenue or reputation or trust becomes the anchor. Not 10 tasks, not a flurry of gestures, one meaningful turn of the wheel. The nervous system learns to associate morning with momentum, not with panic. By noon, the day already holds a wind that cannot be taken away by noise. Winds placed early tend to multiply. They invite more of their kind. There is a kind of session that almost feels sacred. The door closes. The phone rests face down and far away. The breathing settles into the belly. The spine lengthens. A single objective sits in the light like a simple meal on a clean plate. Time stretches in both directions. Minutes stop scattering like birds and begin to walk in formation. People call it deep work or a focus block. The name is less important than the sensation. You can feel your mind grip the problem with kindness. You can feel ideas unwind. You can feel satisfaction growing even before the result appears. Effort and meaning finally meet. Steadiness needs a companion to remain itself. It needs truth, not the kind that shames, the kind that witnesses. A quiet review at the end of a week becomes a mirror that does not distort. Promises kept are counted. Promises missed are noted without drama. The brain likes this closure. The heart likes this honesty. Together they create a small current of trust inside you. Trust in yourself is not arrogance. It is the ability to rely on your own word the way you hope others can. When that trust returns, you move through your days with less drag. You stop negotiating with your own intentions. You simply live them. The ancient image returns with more meaning now. The ant moves. It does not audition. It does not explain. It carries a portion and then another and then another. The load is light enough to repeat. The steps are small enough to sustain. Nothing spectacular happens on any given afternoon, yet a storehouse appears where there was none, and shelter appears where there was none, and winter looks different because summer was not wasted on gestures. The crowd will always celebrate the locust, loud and airborne and sudden. The harvest will always thank the ant. There is also mercy hidden inside this way of working. When perfection is not the standard, progress becomes possible. When pace is chosen for longevity, failure turns into feedback instead of a verdict. The spiritual life knows this mercy. Faithfulness is not a spike. It is a pulse. It does not burn out the heart to look holy. It keeps the heart beating so the hands can serve quietly for a very long time. Practical spirituality meets emotional neuroscience here again. Attention is worship when it honors what matters. Consistency is prayer when it protects what is good. Some people fear that steadiness will make life small. They imagine boredom, gray days, a dimming of joy. The opposite appears. Energy once spent on restarting can finally be spent on creating. Confidence once borrowed from caffeine and crisis can finally grow from work that actually finishes. Relationships once strained by constant apology can finally rest because your word means what it says. Joy becomes less like fireworks and more like a hearth, warm enough to gather around, strong enough to last through wind. You may notice a different strength in your body when this rhythm takes root. The jaw loosens, the breath deepens, the shoulders roll back and find their right height. Evening comes, and the mind does not chase after all the undone, because the meaningful was already done. Night becomes rest again. Morning becomes welcome again. This is what diligence feels like when it is not punishment. It is an ally. It is a friend who walks beside you at a human pace and refuses to let your life be stolen by spectacle. In this gentler light, drama no longer looks like energy. It looks like noise. Steadiness no longer looks like compromise. It looks like wisdom. The ant's quiet steps outweigh the locust's noise, because quiet steps arrive again tomorrow. Quiet steps arrive when you are tired and when you are bright. Quiet steps do not need applause to keep moving. They have already chosen who they are. And slowly, almost without announcement, they carry you across a room you once believed was too long to cross. There is a loneliness that does not look lonely from the outside. It looks efficient. It looks decisive. It looks like a captain at the wheel with steady hands and eyes on the horizon. Inside, the weather is different. Inside, there is the low ache of carrying the whole map alone. Inside, there is the strange mix of pride and dread that comes from wins that have no witness and losses that have no cushion. The body learns this ache and begins to live braced. The jaw tightens, the chest stays guarded. Sleep negotiates with worry and often loses. When choices are made in isolation, even the right ones feel heavier than they need to feel. The mind tells a tidy story to justify the weight. Too many voices slow me down. Advice will dilute my vision. If I pause to check my bearings, someone else will pass me. On the surface, this story sounds brave. Underneath it is fear with a good haircut. The fear is not only of being wrong, it is of being seen being wrong. So the mind hides inside certainty and calls it strength. The nervous system joins the act. It narrows attention, blocks out interruption, and turns every decision into a test of identity. Now the stakes are no longer about this choice. They are about who you are. That is a punishing way to live. Wisdom answers with a quiet principle that has weathered many seas. Plans are steadier when many eyes have scanned the horizon. Safety grows where counsel is shared. This is not a call to crowd your life with noise. It is a call to widen the light that guides you. No single star can promise a safe route through fog. No single perspective can hold all the angles a complex decision carries within it. Counsel is not a courtroom where you must defend your worth. It is a harbor where truth can speak without ceremony. The heart knows the difference. One place makes you smaller, the other makes you safer. Emotional neuroscience explains why counsel changes the feel of choice. Under stress, the amygdala tends to hijack attention and push for rapid protective action. In that state, the brain simplifies the world into now and later, threat and escape. Bringing a trusted voice into the moment interrupts the trance. It invites the prefrontal cortex to re-enter with its gifts of foresight, cost counting and restraint. The room cools, the options widen. A path that looked urgent begins to look expensive. A path that looked slow begins to look wise. The body registers this shift. Shoulders descend, breathing deepens. You have felt this relief before and called it clarity. There is a kind of counsel that dignifies rather than dominates. It begins with people who prize integrity over impression. It continues with those who understand money and time and character as one woven fabric. One brings practical vision to the table. One holds the moral compass steady when the wind is tricky. One understands operations and the hidden costs that hide under shiny surfaces. They are not saviors. They are steady lights in different corners of the sky. You do not need their spotlight. You need their angles. With angles, blind spots shrink. With angles, drift slows. The more consequential the choice, the more the body benefits from shared seeing. When commitment will stretch across seasons, when a price will echo through family or team, when a decision will consume energy that cannot be easily replenished, counsel becomes an act of care. Care for the future. Care for the people your choices touch. Care for your own nervous system that has carried too much alarm for too many years. In the presence of wise voices, alarm gives way to awareness. Awareness gives way to alignment. Alignment gives way to peace that does not depend on outcomes to exist. Shame sometimes blocks the door to counsel. What if they think less of me for not knowing? What if asking makes me look small? The old wisdom smiles at this fear. Asking does not make you small. Pretending makes you brittle. Counsel is not a performance review. It is a conversation among people who have decided that truth matters more than image. In that atmosphere, questions are not confessions of failure. They are signals of maturity. You are not handing away authority. You are refusing to be ruled by ego, dressed as independence. There is another gift hidden in shared decisions. Accountability changes the taste of victory and the sting of loss. When a good choice bears fruit, gratitude has somewhere to go. You can look someone in the eye and say, "That light helped me see." When a choice stumbles, resilience has a place to stand. The story is no longer "I failed" alone. The story becomes "we learned together." The nervous system prefers that story. It does not pile meaning onto a single heart that is already carrying too much. Picture a ship in open water under a sky that looks almost clear. One bright star rises, and the captain fixes on it as if it were the only light that matters. The sea shifts. A veil of thin fog moves in. The bright star holds its place, but the water does not care. Current begins to slide the hull in a quiet diagonal. A cluster of lights off port would reveal the drift, but pride or haste or habit keeps the gaze locked on one solitary point. This is how ships that should have arrived arrive late. This is how ships that should have slept in calm water wake to the scrape of rock. Sailing by one star invites shipwreck. There is no shame in admitting that your night sky needs more lights. In fact, it is an act of reverence for the life you are building. Counsel does not erase your instincts. It refines them. Counsel does not cancel your authority, it protects it. When you finally allow a few wise voices to stand near the wheel, you discover that decisiveness becomes cleaner, not slower. You speak fewer words and they weigh more. You make fewer moves and they cost less. You rest more deeply because you are no longer guarding every inch of the horizon alone. What begins as humility ends as relief. The body registers it first. The breath lengthens, the jaw loosens, the brow smooths. You carry the same responsibility with less strain. You stop rehearsing every worst case in your head because someone else has already helped you name the hidden edges. You stop bargaining with yourself at midnight because the choice was made in daylight. When storms come, as storms do, you find yourself grateful for the quiet voices that stood with you when the water was still. Their presence is the difference between white knuckles and a steady hand. Their counsel is the difference between a narrow life guarded by fear and a spacious life guided by wisdom. In this light, independence is no longer confused with isolation. Strength is no longer confused with secrecy. Leadership is no longer a costume you sweat inside. It becomes a simple posture, open eyes, open ears, a willing heart, a steady wheel guided by more than one star. And the path you are tracing through the water begins to look less like survival and more like a voyage, where arrival feels like peace rather than luck. Picture the whole story gathered in one room. The kitchen is warm, but the flame is measured, not frantic, and the meal that once burned now releases a steady fragrance that invites patience to sit down. The collar that looked beautiful and binding has been unclasped, and the neck remembers what freedom feels like when money no longer speaks with a leash. A clay vessel rests on the table, its fine cracks tended with care, and the oil no longer slips away when no one is looking. Along the floor, a small worker moves with quiet resolve, carrying what it can carry, returning, carrying again, teaching the heart that constancy is a stronger fuel than adrenaline. Beyond the window, a ship holds a truer course because the captain has learned to trust a small constellation rather than a single brilliant point. And the water that once felt treacherous now looks like a road that welcomes rather than warns. This is how wisdom feels when it touches the body. The breath sits lower in the belly. The mind stops rehearsing imaginary disasters because the day contains real anchors, not dramatic gestures. The planning mind returns to its rightful seat, and the guarding mind can finally loosen its grip. The spirit that once shouted to be heard now speaks in a clear tone that is difficult to ignore because it is gentle and grounded. Practical spirituality and the science of calm meet here, not as theory but as sensation. Shoulders descend, jaw softens, vision widens. You can feel the difference between rush and readiness, between glitter and goodness, between noise and guidance. There is a rhythm available to ordinary days that changes their weight without changing their shape. Decisions wait for a breath, so clarity can walk in before appetite takes the lead, and urgency loses some of its costume when it cannot perform in a room that is not afraid. Debts shrink in human ways through small proofs of progress that teach the nervous system to believe what the eyes can see, and respect comes back into conversations that once felt cold and mechanical. Margin becomes a kind of shelter rather than a restriction, a quiet boundary that tells the body there is space for surprise and therefore no need to live braced. Work finds its early window again, a simple block where attention is a refuge and meaning is allowed to gather. And by midday, the heart carries a wind that no wave can take away. Counsel takes its seat at the table, and leadership stops feeling like a lonely test and starts feeling like a shared light that makes good paths easier to recognize. The images we have gathered are not ornaments. They are tools that the soul remembers when words grow thin. When the heat rises in the room, you will recall the careful cook and set the temperature that protects the meal. When a shiny offer promises comfort while tightening a grip, you will see the leash for what it is and hear the small click of release as a sound your body was made to trust. When increase arrives, you will think of the vessel and choose the kind of strength that keeps oil from slipping through. When noise crowds the day, you will feel the steps of the small worker inside your chest and choose steady over spectacle. When fog gathers on the water, you will lift your eyes to more than one light and steer with the peace that comes from angles rather than pride. In this quieter order, prosperity changes its name. It is no longer a chase that steals sleep, It becomes capacity. It becomes the ability to receive without spilling, to grow without cracking, to decide without bracing, to enjoy without fearing the bill for joy. The heart that wears this order does not need to prove itself with loud declarations. It proves itself with days that end settled and mornings that begin with welcome. The people around you feel it before you announce it. They feel the steadiness. They feel the trust. They feel the room you make for goodness to stay. Let this be the taste that lingers. Not louder but truer, not hurried but guided, not heavier but wiser. The kitchen stays warm without smoke. The collar remains open. The vessel holds. The small worker keeps moving. The ship finds home water by a sky that is generous with light. And under all of it, a single promise hums in a tone your body understands. Peace can live where wisdom leads. Let the room grow quiet for a moment that belongs only to you. A soft clearing where the past sets down its weight and the future stops knocking long enough for the present to breathe. Feel the air move in and move out, an old rhythm returning like a friend from childhood. In this quiet, the stories we have opened begin to settle, and what once felt scattered begins to find its shape. The mind that once chased every flashing light learns again to love the steady glow of a single lamp, and the body that once braced for impact learns again to trust the floor beneath its feet. There is a deeper current beneath the language of money, a current that speaks of safety and belonging and enoughness that does not need to be proven by spectacle. When wisdom sits at the table, the nervous system hears a different drum, slower and kinder, and the anxious circuitry loosens its grip. Awareness rises like dawn over a coastline you know by heart. You recognize the landmarks. You recognize yourself. Practical spirituality and the science of calm meet here, and the meeting feels less like a lesson and more like a homecoming. The images remain because the soul remembers pictures when words grow thin, a careful flame that protects the meal, a collar unlatched that frees the breath, a vessel mended so the oil can remain, small steps that outlast loud wings, a sky generous with lights for a captain who has learned to steer by more than one star. These are not ornaments for a shelf. They are companions for ordinary days. They stand beside you quietly when tension rises and remind your hands how to move with care. Peace changes the taste of everything it touches. Work stops dragging courage through gravel and begins to walk with it on level ground. Rest stops negotiating with worry and begins to hold its own place at the table. Joy stops feeling like a purchase that arrives with a receipt and begins to feel like a gift that can stay without being justified. The people who share your life notice this before announcements are made. They hear it in your voice. They see it in your shoulders. They feel it in the room you make for kindness. There is a dignity in living this way that does not ask permission from fear. It is quiet and it is strong. It does not need a spotlight because it carries its own light. It does not demand applause because it keeps its promises when no one is watching. Wisdom is not loud, and yet it is unmistakable. It sits in the backbone. It sits in the breath. It sits in the tone you use with yourself when the day is hard and the road is longer than you hoped. If you listen closely, you can hear a blessing rising from beneath the noise. It tells you that you are not behind and you are not alone. It tells you that your life is capable of holding goodness without spilling it, that your hands can learn the temperature that protects what you love, that your steps can find a rhythm that carries you through weather with grace. It tells you that counsel is not a wound to pride, but a shelter for peace, that margin is not a shrinking of joy, but the ground where joy can stand. So let the evening close softly around you, like a shawl warmed by a trusted fire. Let the breath return to its slow river. Let your heart rest in the ordinary miracle of a day that found its shape. Tomorrow will come with its familiar chorus, and you will be ready in a way that does not strain, because wisdom has taken a seat inside you and made a quiet promise it intends to keep. Peace can live where wisdom leads, and where peace lives, a life can finally open its hands and receive without fear.